Hello, everybody. If you're watching live, hello. If you're watching this in the future, hello to you too. Hello. I'm your host Woody, and with me today is.
Lone Gamer.
Dreamer Girl.
So first off, I'd like to say we apologize for not being with you guys last week.
Lone Gamer was exhausted. He was falling asleep. Nobody wants to see that.
Again.
We'd already had enough problems with him falling asleep during the Married with Children episode, so.
Yeah, they beat
So
me
we
with pool noodles afterwards.
And then
So we-
and then Woody and I couldn't decide what we wanted to record, and by the time we had it figured out, it was too late.
Yes, so we do apologize. But for this week, we're going to follow on from 2 weeks ago, where we looked at the lone gamer's reading habits, what sort of books he likes to read, and so on and so forth. Where it's now my turn in the hot seat.
You read?
Yes, and I'm going to make this I'm going to put this on record. Yes, I do read more books than those cardboard books that have like 5 pages, 3 words a page, and about a dog called Ben, and come with a guarantee that says this book is waterproof and chewable.
Wow. Does your book have Big Bird on it?
No, and I'm going to say for a fact as well, my books do not make noises.
Oh, that's good.
Well, not anymore. They used to. No, I'm saying, come on, we all remember those books we had as toddlers that had like little squeakers in them.
Mm-hmm.
Now they make them where you can push it and it makes a sound as you read them.
Oh, wow. Well, yes, I remember those. Those were my sort of introduction to reading, those waterproof vinyl books that had like a little squeaker on the front cover.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, they probably stopped making those after a long time ago.
Well, you are old.
Yes, I am old. I can't believe I'll be 40 in June, July, August. 4 months. Considering that I'm in the future now and it's the 1st of July, so.
Don't you mean 1st of June?
1st of June. Okay, yeah, 1st of June.
I was like, did I sleep through a whole month?
No, that's just me.
If I slept through a whole month, I'd be like, what kind of stuff is I on? Can I get more?
That'd be great.
All right, then, Rip Van Winkle.
No, he is a TARDIS. He went forward a month, in
Well, yeah, that does make sense. I am a slightly eccentric and weird British guy. Makes sense. I've got.
Okay, question is, do you have a sonic screwdriver?
I have a Sonic TV remote.
You have to have a sonic screwdriver.
Well, it's Time Lord technology. Can be whatever it wants.
No, it's a sonic screwdriver.
But anyway, let's start the discussion. So, who's got my first a question they want to ask me about books?
I'll let you go first.
Okay, I'll make.
Okay, I'm going to start off with a banger.
Okay then.
Well, what would it take for you to read a Nora Roberts book?
If I'm trapped in a library, there are no books other to read, and the only thing on the shelf is a Nora Roberts. And it was my only form of entertainment.
You thinking what I'm thinking, Lone Gamer?
Hmm?
Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
I don't know.
Are you sure? Look, Dreamer, are you sure you want to spend the $3.50 on sending me some toilet paper.
No, I'm gonna lock you in a library. I'm gonna take away all the other books but Nora Roberts books, and you'll have no choice but to read them.
Well, let's just hope there's some toilet paper in the bathroom then.
Oh, there'll be plenty.
I'm sorry, I had to get that question out of the way just for giggles.
So, do you want me to? So, do you guys want me to start you off so you have a bit of framework?
Well, I was going to say, what was the last book that you read?
Actually, the book I read, physical reading, it's actually been a long time ago before I actually started working the late shift. But if we're counting reading as in Audible, then it was I was actually listening to The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, the complete edition by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, read by Stephen Fry. I think
audiobooks do count. They do count.
Okay.
I know some people will find this a very controversial thing because some people will say audiobooks don't count. Some people, like me, say that they do count. Because I feel like even if you're not like physically holding
Reading.
the book, you're still listening to it being read to you. So that's why I say it counts.
Yes.
So to all those people who say it doesn't count, don't come at me.
Yeah, I never fully agree because working the night shift, reading has sort of taken a back. Physically reading has taken a bit of a back seat now, and I've literally found that Audible has been a great way for me to, access books and have listened to them told via various narrators that I can actually still enjoy them.
Now, I have another question for you. Do you have a TBR, like a to be read?
Yes, I actually have. I'm not afraid to say this. I have about 200 or so books on my Audible list. Some in various condition. Some have been finished. Some I've only listened to part of the way through, put it down, and not come back to it. And I've got some that I'm like, I will get to you, and I will tell you 100% for a fact that the Golden Girls Murder by Cheesecake is 100% on that TBR list. But the reason I haven't got to it yet is I want to dedicate the 8 or 9 hours the book length is on Audible to actually actually paying attention, because I don't want to fall asleep part of the way through and actually miss the good stuff.
Okay.
I mean, that in my opinion is one of the downsides to Audible, is that if you're listening to a story and you do fall asleep, you do actually it keeps playing in the background and you do tend to miss.
Yeah, it's about almost 8 hours.
Yeah, so it's an 8 hours. I want to dedicate the full 8 hours to the story so I can actually pay attention. I don't want to miss anything.
And then one final question to follow up on that. Have you ever DNF'd or did not finish a book because you did not like it?
Yeah.
And which one was it?
There was a number of books on Audible that I downloaded for free because some of these books, one of the good things I like about Audible is the Plus catalog, where you can download a whole bunch of books for free. And some of these are up and coming authors, and I have and I'm going to be the one. A lot of the books on in the sci-fi section I've downloaded because they've they look good, they appeal to me. And then when I started it, it just didn't work. I mean, I know one of the ones I definitely did DNF was part of the Aliens franchise, the Vasquez novel. I mean, as much as I liked it, the whole what I was expecting from the book was like, oh look, this is a book about Vasquez, the badass Marine from the Alien movie. We're going to get some stories around that. No, 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 no. She's like dead in the. It starts off with her, her death in like the first little bit of the book, and then the rest of the story is told by her daughter in the future. I mean, I gave it that opportunity. I gave it that chance, and it just didn't gel with me. So I ended up deleting it and just never going back to it. Stopping the book, deleting it, and never going back to it.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't anything to do with the narrator, really. It was just I gave it the swing of the bat. I gave it the couple
And
of
the story itself just didn't really stick with you.
It's in
yeah,
vibe.
yeah, it didn't judge.
Happens to the best of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've all been this, especially. I think we can all agree we've all, gone into a series, especially a well-known series, that's got multiple books in the type in this franchise. You try one and it's just, this doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, a few times. Just a few. You got any questions, Lone Gamer?
Actually, I do.
Mm-hmm.
Out of all the books you've finished, which one was probably the dumbest you've ever read?
Oh, that's a good one. Oof. I know that you got me got on the back. Oh, that with that one. The dumbest book I ever read.
That you finished.
I'm gonna have to say this. I tried it just because of what it was. I think it would have to be some of the Jesse Ventura conspiracy theory books.
Yeah, I could understand why.
I must admit, I actually fell asleep listening to some of those. I mean, they are quite informative and they are quite interesting for what they are, but yeah, it's just some of it is just absolutely stupid and crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you have a favorite genre of books that you like to read?
Mostly, I quite like historical fiction, sci-fi, and one of the things I also really am a fan of are those TV, movie, and video game tie-in novels.
To see if, especially like the movie or the video game, if they're canon stories or just their own separate little mini story.
Yeah. Sort of like how in the early 2000s there was a bunch of Resident Evil novels written by S.D. Perry. That was sort of like there were some were adaptations of the game, and then there was some original story set within the timeline of the original Resident Evil trilogy.
Yeah.
Do you have a least favorite genre?
To be fair, yeah, I'm not really, while I will read some, I got to be the right kind of fantasy, romancy that, and definitely that sort of what I would consider chick lit on, I probably wouldn't touch. No,
the
but
look Dreamer Girl gave you
no, but
screams volumes.
No, but the fact is that as popular as Twilight is, it just doesn't appeal to me in any aspect, so I wouldn't read it.
Don't
That's
that into chick lit, please don't.
Hmm?
Don't lump that into chicklet. That is its own category.
That's why I use the air quotes chicklet stuff. It's just,
It's actually a genre, so please don't put Twilight into there. I beg of you.
well, I was there. I remember the whole Twilight craze. It was mostly women reading it. I know of very few guys, if at all, that actually read it at the top. When it was, at the peak in the cinema and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you read it, but here's the kicker with that one, Rob. Sorry, gamer. I did not know you at that time in period, so it doesn't count. So you understand my point, when
Okay.
I mean, like I said, with that, that fantasy mystery, I think, I think Dreamer and Gamer, you might appreciate it when I say this, is I got to be in the right frame of mind in the old grey matter to sit down and, chew my way through it.
In other words, you're going to need brainworms to deal with it.
Exactly.
We'll go get that gas station hot dog.
No, yeah, But it's like Dreamer, when I gave you that when I bought that X-Files books for you.
Mhm.
While it's sci-fi horror mystery, you got to be in the right sort of headspace.
You have to be in the right mood. It's on my TBR. Like, it's literally sitting there and it's staring at me saying,
yeah, but the thing is,
me.
because
But then when I go to open it, I'm like,
are you really in the mood? Are you really in the mood for sort of murder, mystery, supernatural, sci-fi, body horror? And when you look at it, you go, no,
not today.
Not today. I'm more in the mood for gelato and ice cream, or whatever it was called that you sent
Love
to
and gelato.
Love and Gelato. You could be in that frame of mood today.
I got another good one for you.
Go on then, Gamer.
If you were to choose a book or a series of books to reread from the beginning to end, what would that be?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think it might have to be those original Lucasfilm, the Lucas books, Star Wars Expanded Universe novels.
Oh, those are good.
Because, I mean, the thing is, those were fantastic pieces of sci-fi literature back in the day.
I'll even admit I read some of those.
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to go preface this, is these were sort of my gateway into reading in my teenage years.
Oh, so these books were basically the books to get you started.
Yeah, I read a lot as a kid, but I read a lot of fiction, non-fiction books back then. I was really interested in like dinosaurs and stuff in my younger days, so I read a lot of those, factual books on dinosaurs. I had a lot of books about dinosaurs, and then in my teenage years, I gravitated towards the sort of licensed novels, because these were sort of my entry point into reading, reading the adult book, if you know what I mean. You know that point in your life in your teenage years when you put the kids' books away, and you step into the world of adult fiction. Yeah, whatever path you take, whatever book you pick up in the adult fiction world, this was my entry point. This is where I started reading like the Aliens and the Alien and Predator franchises, Star Wars, Star Trek.
Okay, then a question to lead off that. Which one of these Star Wars novels was your favorite?
Oh, I was definitely Shadows of the Empire. I
Okay.
mean, I borrowed that book from the school library. I read that book. I loved it. I couldn't put it down. As soon as I returned it, I found a cheap copy in a bookstore, bought it, took it home. It was one of my treasured books. And I also remember that massive merchandise push around that book as well. I don't know, Gamer, if you remember the video game that came out at the same time for like the N64 and the PC.
Which game?
Star Wars: Shadows of the Empire.
I don't recall it.
Okay, but it had a massive media blitz around it.
Yeah, that's probably maybe before my time or around the time where I really didn't pay too much attention.
Yeah, it was like 97, 98 when it sort of got this massive media push.
Okay.
Well, Woody, let me remind you that out of the three of us, the lone gamer is the youngest.
Yeah, I get.
And he was born in 91. So let's think about how old would he have been around that time?
Yeah, I get. Just that moment. It was just that moment when you're like, it was a video. It was like really popular for like a really hot minute. The one thing I do remember in the books that just seems rather cringeworthy now looking back at it, but at the time it was really cool, was all those post Star Trek Generations books written by William Shatner where he decided that he wasn't going to kill off Captain Kirk, and he did all these Captain Kirk novels.
Okay.
I'll have to ask my brother about that because you and him are the same age.
Yeah, there was I did have some of those post Star Trek Generations novels where William Shatner decided, I'm going to bring back Captain Kirk and everything is going to. He never died in the movie. He never died like he does in the movie. He's still out there and he's saving the day. And the problem is, and I'm going to say this, at the time, William Shatner was just not a very good author. And a lot of the times there was a lot of cringy dialogue and a lot of very ego power trippy moments he was pulling with the Kirk character.
We've all read a book where somebody shouldn't have written it.
Yep.
You should have had a ghostwriter.
Yep. It's also one of them ones where an actor where somebody his editor should have been a bit more a case of. I'll restart that. Yeah, those Kirk books are definitely in the state. Should have been in where his editor went. Bill, I think you need to redo this one. But I guess it was that. Yeah, or But I guess at the time Paramount was just throwing money because they realized people, the Star Trek fans would have just bought these Bill Shatner books.
Are there any books that you regret reading?
Well, aside from the the William Shatner written Kirk is a god type books, I can't really see anything that really springs to mind in saying, oh, it was so terrible. I really regret picking this book up. I mean, it's like, yeah, have there been some really bad video game, movie, TV show tie-ins? Absolutely. Are there some that are so terrible that you think, ooh, it's what did you do? Take the money and run? What, and get your friend to write it for you? But did I regret reading them? No, not really.
Are there any popular book series that you want to read now?
I mean, I'd like to have a look at some of the Halo novels and the Assassin's Creed novels. Because I kind of missed out on some of those, and I'd like to see, what they did with those very popular now franchises, especially at the time, they were written.
Well, what about what about like book series like Series of Unfortunate Events, Percy Jackson, Divergent? Now that they're not as popular.
I mean, I'd like to go back and have a read at some of the James Bond novels because I never really read those, and I watched the movies, right? But this, I'd actually like to go back and have a look at, those books, in the state they were written, the follow-up novels that were written after the popularity by other writers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that maybe one day I'll take a look at Harry Potter, but it never even though it never really appealed to me.
I mean, nothing wrong with that.
No, it's not for everybody. I mean, I feel like Harry Potter, well, it was super popular for mine and gamers generation.
Yeah, because I mean, not when it came out in 1997, I was what, 15 at the time, and I was a bit too old for that kind of.
I mean, I would say you might not have been too old because, I mean, there were 15-year-olds reading Harry Potter when it first came out. It might not just have vibed.
Yeah.
Because I always was curious about how the craze, because I know it was crazy here in the States when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
But I always kind of wondered, what was it like in the UK? Because she's from the UK.
I mean, to be fair, the first Harry Potter book, it sort of slipped under the radar at first. It was one of these books. It was like, yes, it was a good book. It was quite popular, but I mean, it was one of them ones that was sort of like, I think you can understand it when I say it was popular, but then it sort of snowballed as time went on, especially with the announcement of, the movie.
I mean, that makes sense.
When and then once we saw the first shots of the movie with that rather young-looking Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, and Rupert Grint back when they first got cast in 1999, 2000. That's when it spiraled into
the craze.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where here it was kind of, if I remember correctly, it was kind of crazy.
Yeah. But I should have, but I kind of wondered, with the States, was your craze really down to the fact of the Philosopher's Stone movie?
think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
I may be remembering this wrong, but I think the hype was more towards the books than the movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, a lot of it was because, see, I remember it being like super controversial, and I'm sure you kind of like vaguely remember this, Lone Gamer. You're a little bit younger than me, but not like insanely younger than me. So, I mean, I remember it was more like it was super controversial because it had magic in it. And like,
Oh yeah, I do remember all like those Christian moms groups pushing, campaigning to get it pulled from bookstores and libraries and school libraries.
and I think that that's kind of what made it self-propel into what it was, because then when parents realize, oh, my kid is reading, this is so exciting, like I just want my kid to read and not be sitting and playing video games all day,
Mm-hmm.
then they realized, oh, and then it kind of started this whole
So
craze.
my question then to you then, Dreamer, is: do you really think if those religious groups had left Harry Potter alone, that Harry Potter might not really have been a major success in the United States?
No, I don't think that. I think that, it became a success because it got kids to read, and it took a
Hmm.
whole generation of children who hadn't
But
really read a whole lot
the way
to,
I
to all
feel,
of a sudden wanting to read this book, because we would have it read to us in school. Like, I remember my teacher reading the first few chapters to us in school. And
but
I
I
remember going home and saying, hey, I want to read this book.
but I kind of, one of the reasons I ask that is because part of me thinks that the reason it was a success in the US was the sort of Streisand effect
No,
of these groups.
I think a lot of it was, and this is like looking at it now from an adult like standpoint who has a child. I think a lot of it is, and I'm sure Lone Gamer can remember this, they were reading it to us in school. And they're
But
reading this book to us, and teachers would read different books to us like every week, and they'd read like 5 or like so chapters of a book to us. And because it happened the same with Inkheart, and then that series, granted, was not as like,
see, I never read that book, but I do remember the movie that came out
and
about it
so,
with Brendan Fraser in it, I believe it was.
and I just remember my teacher reading like the first like 5 or so chapters of this book, and they did the same with Harry Potter. And I remember it just, schools around the nation were reading it to children.
Hmm.
And then children were like sponges, and we hear the first 5 or so chapters of this book, and it's one of those books, I'm sure you've read some of these, that like once you start reading it, you have to know what's happening next. You
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
stop in the middle and then you're fine with not knowing. You had to
Hmm.
know, did Harry, become friends with Hermione? Did Harry become, his best friends with Ron? What happens? Like, where does this go? And so then we'd have to go home and be like to our parents, I want to read this book. And then our parents were the ones who found that, it was a controversial book. And then they had to sit and make a decision. Will I allow
Yeah.
my child to read this book or will I not? And then it just kind of,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get you. I get you.
so I feel like
Because
a
I,
lot of it is because of schools reading it to kids is
because
why
part,
it became so popular.
Mm-hmm.
because part of me has always sat there thinking, I've been one of those people that believes, the more some people try and ban something that's, for all intents and purposes, innocuous and innocent, the more and the more publicized it is, the more eyes are going to be looking at what's being banned, and they're going to want to, buy it. Because I mean, if you think about it, if someone's, you got someone telling you that Harry Potter is evil, you're going to want to read it because it's now on the interest. It's generated this national interest, and in many cases, because I knew about these bans, international. And the fact that these people were going into Barnes and Nobles and ripping copies of the book off the shelf and throwing them and putting them elsewhere in the store. But yeah, I do also get your point that you heard about this in school. You got the excerpt of the book, and then you literally ran off and begged your mom to buy you a copy of Harry Potter because you've heard the first chapter, and like, oh my god, I need more.
That's basically it. And I mean, because it was, by Scholastic, in schools, they basically would have the Scholastic book fair.
Yeah, and Audible kind of do that now because if you want to check out a book without even listening, you can tap the preview. They've got a little preview button, and you get a 5-minute excerpt from the book that you can listen to. The first chapter, and you're like,
Now, are there any books that you've listened to the first chapter that really stood out to you?
Yeah. I mean, aside, there's always the classic literature on there that I've got, like the H.G. Wells collection, Sherlock Holmes. Yeah, but it's also when you listen to some of these movie novels and how they paint the picture into the world. Because the introduction to Ghostbusters, it sort of, when I first played the Ghostbusters audio book, which is based on the first movie, it paints the picture of 1984 New York in September. You've got the fall day, you've got the beautiful weather, you got people going about their day, so you feel like you're walking the streets of New York on this September morning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the world is portrayed, and how it leads into the whole incident with Alice Levin that's kicks off the whole Ghostbusters movie. But that opening chapter, how they set everything up, everything, but it's just being treated as just a normal day.
Now, since you do more audiobooks, what do you look for in an Audible, like in a narrator?
I mean, I like someone who's, clear, concise, has a bit of energy, energy to their voice, tries to differentiate between themselves and the characters if it's a story. Because, I mean, let's be real, we've all, I mean, do you have an Audible account, Gamer? Have you?
I do not.
Okay, but when I say this to Dreamer, I'm sure you've listened to some audiobooks where the narrator is just completely monotone. There's no emotion in the voice, and they don't differentiate between themselves and the characters.
Mm-hmm.
So you often have to give it another try to go, hang on, is he talking? Is that supposed to be one of the characters? Is that the narrator? I don't know these things. Because that's what I want in a narrator. I want, a narrator that makes you feel like you are part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm laid there with my eyes closed and I'm just, listening, I'm playing it in my head. So I want to feel like I'm there.
Yeah.
And I think, some of those, like with the X-Files books, both Bronson Pinchot, yes, I'm talking about the Bronson Pinchot from the Beverly Hills Cop movies, and Hilary Huber, they do a good job of portraying, not only the narrator of the story, but also, Mulder, Scully, Skinner, and other characters within the story. And like with the Ghostbusters, Johnny Heller does his best to try and differentiate between the 4 different Ghostbusters.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then you got some narrators like that they don't try and differentiate too much, so you have to do a bit of guesswork. But yeah, that's what I like. Yeah, and that's what I look for.
What's the longest audiobook you've listened to?
It was 74 hours and 42 minutes.
Good God.
It was Otto Penzler's ultimate black. Basically, it was the big book of pulps. It was basically a collection of. If you don't know what a pulp is, it's those crime and detective fiction stories that were very popular in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s.
And then what's the shortest audiobook you've listened to?
One was about an hour long. It was Deep Thoughts with the Deep. It was a tie-in podcast that got released for I think it was like season 2 or 3 of The Boys. It was about an hour long. But it was played off as this podcast that the Deep was doing.
That's a good one.
And it was entirely free, so it was absolutely fantastic.
Now, do you prefer the free content or do you prefer using your credits?
I mean, it depends on the book. Because some of the ones I've actually had for free for the period you get them on the Audible Plus account, and then as soon as the trial's over, if I've been really enjoying it and listened to it multiple times in there's like 3 to 6 months, you often get them. I'll happily drop the credit to keep it.
But if it's been one of those that's like,
I listened to it in the free period. It was okay. It's alright. I mean, there was some I've done that way, and I've picked them up when Audible's dropped the price to like $2.99 or $3.99. So I think, so I'm not because if you think about it, if you're paying like $8 for a, $7.99 normally for a audio book, dropping $2.99 for a book, you thought it was okay. It was okay. Doesn't seem that too big of a deal.
true.
It's what I consider. You got it on the clearance aisle. Because I mean, all 3 of us have bought books. Some, you're happy to pay the full the full price for at the bookstore. Some you think, yeah, I'll wait. I can. It was good when I borrowed it from the library or whatever, but I'll pick it up cheap.
That's very true.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
yeah, that's
cannot disagree with that at all.
yeah. I think Dreamy, you've been in a situation, where you've gone. You know what? I really like this book. I'll happily pay the full price for it. It's that good. It's worth the dime.
And then I've read some where I'm like,
It's good. It's good. It passes the test. It passes the smell test, but don't want to pay full price. Any other questions from YouTube?
It's
so I'm
what
waiting
I'm
to see if
trying to
Rob
think.
has any, or the gamer has any.
I'm trying to think.
Come on, hamster, do your thing.
Currently, the answer in my brain is going: do I want to dance to the Macarena or do I want to go to bed?
We're asking him to run around in his wheel and generate one of those things, you call a thought.
He has thoughts?
Yes,
No thoughts,
he does.
just chipmunk dancing.
I'm going to show my age now. Oh, it's no thoughts, just hamster dance.
Don't kill him.
Has there been a book that you would rather that you've read that you would like to see is either in a movie or like a limited TV series?
Oh, I mean the list of like Aliens, Predator, Terminator, Star Trek, even Indiana Jones that could have worked. I mean, when they announced that Patty Jenkins was making an X-wing movie, I was like, is this going to be like the books? Is this going to be Top Gun just with starfighters? Please tell me it's going to be Top Gun with starfighters. I mean, the other thing as well is maybe, with the advent of what they're doing with Jurassic Park, maybe a more book accurate version of Jurassic Park would actually work these days.
Yeah.
Where John Hammond is less, bumbling Walt Disney and more evil industrialist.
Now, are you one of those people that when you've read the book, and then you go and you watch the movie, are you in your head thinking, that wasn't in the book? That wasn't how that worked in the book. That's terrible. Don't do that. That's not how they were.
Oh yeah, one of the examples is, two examples is like all the stuff that happened in Ghostbusters, they happen in Ghostbusters 2, they happen differently to what is in the film. You're like, wait a minute, that scene wasn't in that bit from the book wasn't there. Yeah, and Jurassic Park it's the same, but then again, if you actually, read the original Michael Crichton Jurassic Park, it's more of a horror film. with genetically engineered dinosaurs than it is, in the 1993 Spielberg movie where it's Pirates of the Caribbean gone to hell.
Never really thought about it that way.
Yeah.
You look at like the Jurassic Park movie in 1993. Fantastic movie, by the way. All the special effects hold up now. Yeah. 30 something, 35 years later. Love it. But, then you look at it and realize, wait a minute. The first Jurassic Park movie is literally just, that guy from Seinfeld sends this Disney park to hell. Whereas in the first movie, when you read the book, you realize, oh my God, this is literally a nightmare. This is a horror movie. But is the world ready for a rated R Jurassic Park with all the horror?
Probably not.
I'd go see that.
Yeah.
And then you'd have little children there, like hiding under the movie seat.
Well, yeah. When they see the scene of the little girl even though some of the scenes from the books were put into other films, like if you remember in The Lost World, the little girl that gets ripped apart by the dinosaurs on the beach. That was taken from the first Jurassic Park novel.
Really?
Yep. Because at the start of the book, the compies literally go on a murderous rampage from one end of Costa Rica to the other. And that's the setup to how we know that Jurassic Park exists. Yeah, two literal child murders. Which, I guess it's kind of a thing you couldn't really get away with doing in today's cinema.
Yeah.
Maybe not the same way, but
yeah.
they'd find a way.
Considering in one of the in the novel, the compies actually eat a swaddled newborn baby in a crib, which again you couldn't get away with.
Yeah, and I really didn't need that image in my head.
That's what I mean when I say it's so much darker and more horror story than it is, than what you'd see, what the movie actually did.
I guess I never sat and thought about that.
Yeah.
But I suppose the difference between movie and TV show is the fact that you can get away with a lot more on the page than you can the screen.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Now my next question is, is there a movie or a show that you would like to see in a book?
Oh, that's a good one. That is a good one. And now, depending on how I actually, I haven't quite read it yet, but I'd actually like to see some more of this Golden Girls getting some more love on the page again. And I do hope that this leads to a resurgence. I hope there's more.
Oh yeah.
I think I've heard a rumor that there is going to be more.
And I'm going to kind of deviate a little bit, Gamer, because Well, yeah, this Batman '89 resurgence has happened thanks to the comic book and these two novels. I would actually like to see more of the classic DC and Marvel stuff get some continuing material.
Hmm.
Can you imagine if there was we go back to the X-Men of the 2000s and we get a new story set in that timeline,
Ooh, yeah.
or some more Sam Raimi Spider-Man, or some 1975 Superman.
Yeah.
Done
Like the
that way.
story in between the movies, if there was more than one with the same actor.
Yeah, just imagine what happened. Telling a story on how Logan got to the bar in X-Men 1. Flesh out the events what led to X-Men 1.
Hmm.
Or maybe fill out some of the story between Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. Maybe a story between 2 and 3 where we introduce Eddie Brock. Or maybe see that versions of Kirk Connors becoming his version of the Lizard.
Hmm. Or a continuation after Spider-Man 3 and led to No Way Home.
Yeah, exactly. So, and especially, since Val Kilmer's tragically passed, maybe some, a new story based around Batman Forever.
Like
Or
a tie-in
certainly-
between Batman Forever and Batman and Robin.
Yeah. Because they've continued the Tim Burton and Keaton verse in a series of comic books and 2 novels.
But everybody
Really?
else didn't really get that same treatment.
Yeah, which is that would be cool if we got some more, Christopher Reeve Superman material.
I could see that.
Or since he's come back in Wolverine and Deadpool, how about some more Blade?
Yeah.
How about some more Wesley Snipes Blade? How about that kind of thing? Or even if we go back into the 70s, how about some Lou Ferrigno Hulk getting some love?
True. Or hey, if they gave us older style Thor.
Oh, 60s style, Journey into Mystery Thor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see that. Or maybe, some filler material for the DC EU and MCU.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions?
Do you have any final thoughts about your reading habits?
Yeah, I think, because of my reading habits as a teenager, I think, I sort of lean too heavily into, the what I would call the familiar. There's certain books I read, growing up into my teenage and young adult life that, I think would be a good idea to, if maybe step out of the comfort zone once in a while, and look at something new.
Eh?
I can see that.
Yeah, maybe I should you should like you said earlier, maybe I should stop looking at the Maze Runner series again. No, not for me. And maybe take a chance on it.
Go to the library, Woody.
Oh, I would if I had the time.
Okay. I got a
Well,
really, really good question for you.
Okay.
And this is probably going to spark a debate between these two groups. What's the worst series, The Adventures of Sparkle Nuts or 50 Shades of Shite?
To quote use AVP, whoever wins, we lose.
Well, to be completely honest, 50 Shades of Shite is a fan fiction based off of, Glitter Dick.
I mean, to be fair, I always said that 50 Shades of Shite would possibly, be used as Exhibit A in a court case. I mean, I said this, back in the day. I said, look, you are just lucky that Christian Grey is a multi-billionaire who runs his own company. If his name happened to be Billy Bob and he lived on a trailer in Alabama, he would be on an episode of Criminal Minds.
Well, as somebody who is rereading Twilight, as a fully developed frontal cortex adult,
Yeah.
I am now seeing all of the red flags that I'd seen before, but I'm seeing them in a different
light. You're realizing, oh, that's criminal. Oh, that's illegal. Oh, that is immensely illegal. Oh,
I literally sat and made this face, and Mr. Dreamer was like, "What is going on?" And I'm like, "You don't want to know. We're not discussing this."
Yeah.
But if our son did this, I wouldn't bail him out.
Yeah, that's what I said back in the day. I said if Christian Grey lived in a mobile home in Georgia, he would be on an episode of Criminal Minds.
It wouldn't be Criminal Minds. It'd be Catch a Predator.
It'd be Criminal Minds and Catch a Predator and
Olivia Benson.
Yeah, yes.
Just for you, Dreamer. I said, look, if Christian Grey wasn't a millionaire, Olivia Benson would be kicking his door in and throwing him to the ground.
Yeah.
With a gun aimed at the back of his head.
Yeah. I hate to say this, and I mean, again, people do not come for me. 50 Shades of Shite is literally there are other books. If you want to read that trope, and that is what gets you happy to read, there are thousands of books that are much better written.
I mean, to be fair,
and you can find them on this magical place called Kindle Unlimited.
Also, let's be real.
You don't even have to tell people that you're reading it.
To be fair, let's not beat around the bush here. Some of the actions of the characters in Twilight would get Olivia Benson throwing him to the ground.
Well, yeah, considering, I hate to say this, but Edward, coming into Bella's room is just highly creepy. And the fact that he just, stares at her sleeping and people think that that's cute. Back when I first read it, thought it was creepy. And I now, as a 36-year-old, think it's highly creepy.
She thinks
it's cute, and I'm thinking, no, run.
You got issues.
I'm like, run, go to
No
therapy.
game. No, gamer. She doesn't have issues. She has subscriptions. But yeah, this has been, some of the characters in that you'd be calling 911. You'd have Olivia Benson kicking Edward Cullen's door in, throwing him to the ground.
And the crazy thing is her dad is the chief of police.
How is this? How is these red flags going unnoticed?
Well, and the books. So in the movie, you see that Charlie is like super attentive. He's like always there. He's always spending time with her. He's always around. And then that's when you sit and you wonder, how did this happen? But then when you read the book and you realize that Charlie is always at work, he thinks that the Cullens are like the most amazing people ever. And, he's never home. You can see where
This is Charlie's. The only reason Charlie's thinking the Cullens are the best people ever are because they deliver a white envelope to him every so often.
I don't think so. No, I think he thinks that they're great because, as far as he knows, Dr. Cullen, is this like amazing person. He's a good doctor. He took a pay cut to work at the Forks Hospital, which is like a smaller town, and he doesn't know that they're vampires.
Nope.
He doesn't know that their son is sneaking into his daughter's room at night. Like, he doesn't know. Let me tell you, though, if I knew that my son was doing that.
Yeah, you'd be putting him in the car and taking him to the police station yourself.
I would. And I'd be like, sorry, little dreamer. Like, that's creepy. We don't do that behavior.
You'd be looking and going, jail, now. Jail. Just go on. It's
like,
jail.
Go sit in the pokey overnight.
Go directly to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200.
So, I mean, reading Soul Cortex, I literally have been sitting there going, ooh.
Yeah.
And it has made me like all these people who are Team Edward. I'm like, y'all. And again, I don't come for me, but I think y'all are creepy.
Team Edward versus Team Jacob.
I mean, Team Jacob has his own issues. Like, I'm not saying he doesn't have any, but I will never understand.
Look, all I'm going to say
why
is...
would you want to lay next to something that is cold and dead and as hard as marble when you could lay next to something that's like warm and alive?
Yeah, but the thing is, it's just like Team Dead thing versus Team I definitely hit the gym today.
I took some roids.
I mean, come on. The entire marketing material around Team Jacob was Taylor Lautner doesn't wear shirts. That's all I learned, is that Taylor Lautner only wears shorts.
I got a better one to sum it all up. Team Necrophilia versus Team Furry.
See, I always said that. I said that too.
Oh, you mean Team where Bella Swan has to choose between necrophilia and bestiality.
It is. Too.
It's a teenager's most difficult decision. Does she want to engage in necrophilia today or bestiality today?
See next in New Moon.
I mean, the only thing I remember about, like you say, New Moon is Bella Swan slamming a motorcycle into a tree. I just remember that shot from the trailer when they just showed her like, My boyfriend will save me. Wham! And she just laid in a heap on the floor, like, Edward and Jacob are looking at her going, is he okay?
Well, Edward wasn't really there.
It was just like, you just imagine Edward and Jacob looking at each other, looking at Bella's lifeless body on the floor going, is she okay? Because I also remember, like, she jumped off a cliff, she ran into traffic. Like, my boyfriend will save me!
So I guess it's safe to say that you'll never read the book Twilight, Woody. I guess it's safe to say that.
Look, if you ever come round to my house and you see a copy of 50 Shades of Grey and Twilight on my shelf, you'll know it's the emergency toilet paper stash. It's literally in that, look, these are getting either burnt or used as toilet paper. That's it.
Good to know that that's what you used during the pandemic.
Yeah, that's why if you ever wondered why copies of Twilight suddenly went up in price, it's because I was buying them up to use as TP.
You got to absorb the knowledge somehow.
Hey, you never know when we might have another TP shortage. Gotta stay prepared. And I'm going to say, with Nora Roberts having 225 novels, that's a lot of toilet paper.
Here we go again.
That's a good 6 months worth of toilet paper. That's a good supply. Whew. Any further questions?
Nope, the hamster wheel's done.
I don't have any either.
Okay, so is the hamster's done? Yeah, I think it's safe to say, there's a lot of books, from my youth that I want to re-add again onto my Audible account. I think that, there's like Bernard Cornwell's various series, like the Sharp series, the Starbuck Chronicles. I think, I want to add those. Yeah, I want to start checking out some of the James Bond series. So, with the stuff I want to check out, I think my TBR list is slowly growing to the point where, when I eventually get around to reading Percy Jackson, it might be like 2038.
Well, at least you have a time set.
Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, it's like, that's all I really want to say. There are, I have listened to some of what you guys have been reading, and I have been taking notes to add to my TBR list to eventually check out in the, the future. Because, the way I feel about it is there was a lot of books from the 90s and 2000s that I kind of missed out on, whether it was just, something that either passed me by or didn't interest me at the time that, might be worth taking a look back now I'm a little older and a little wiser. So I hope you've taken a look this peek at Woody's bookshelf.
It was rather fascinating.
If there's no further questions, I think I'd like to say thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure. I've been your host, Woody, and with me,
Lone Gamer
and Dreamer Girl.
Thank you very much for joining us, and good night.